Are you ready to unlock your full potential and maximize your productivity? Look no further than Productivity Smarts, the ultimate audio podcast hosted by renowned productivity expert Gerald J. Leonard. In every episode, Gerald shares captivating stories, invaluable tips, and cutting-edge strategies that will transform the way you approach productivity. Whether you're looking to reduce stress, overcome overwhelm, or simply get more done in less time, Productivity Smarts has got you covered. But that's not all. You'll also gain inspiration from real-life success stories of individuals who have achieved greatness through productivity. Plus, you'll learn the latest tools, techniques, and habits that will help you achieve a new level of happiness and fulfillment in your personal and professional life. So why wait? Join us every week as we delve into the exciting world of productivity and help you unleash your full potential. Get ready to take your productivity to the next level with Productivity Smarts. As a productivity expert and host of the Productivity Smarts podcast, Gerald J. Leonard has been a proud supporter of Kiva since 2011. Kiva is a non-profit organization that helps entrepreneurs in third-world countries access the capital they need to start or grow their businesses. By making a small loan through Kiva, you can help these entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, support their families, and contribute to their local economies. And with a repayment rate of over 96%, your loan can be relent to another entrepreneur once it's repaid, creating a ripple effect of positive change. So if you're looking for a meaningful way to make a difference in the world, consider making a loan through Kiva. With loans as small as $25, anyone can be a microlender and help change lives. Visit kiva.org to learn more and start lending today.
Today I have with me Sally Raymond. In 1991, at just 23, Sally's eldest son, John, gunned his car into the retainer wall to be instantly killed. The shock catapulted this new psychotherapist on an arduous journey of personal, retrospective, and extensive research, which culminated in her recently released book, The Son I Knew Too Late, a guide to help you survive and thrive. This book is written to help parents, sufferers, and loved ones, and friends knowledgeably support young people's individual sustainability, progress, inner growth, resilience through all stages of childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. Sally, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much, Gerald. This is such a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you so much. Well, Sally, obviously, I've read through your book and it is so packed with so many stories and insights that I can't wait for people to hear what you have to share in your stories. But before we do that, I want to ask you a question. What has made you so successful in your career at this point?
That's a good question. I think what I would say that the most important thing that I believe has helped me immensely is the propensity to say yes. I believe in the word yes. I've given speeches that are titled, "The Answer is Yes," because it isn't no. God didn't say no to us. He said yes. And I believe the answer is yes, but I have a caveat because after, 32 years of therapy, working with all kinds of people, including very seriously mentally ill, autistic, and everything, right. I realized that there is a place for no. The place for no is to say yes to something better. You
Excellent.
Say no to say yes to something better. That's the only time no is employed. Open yourself up. Trust the process. Trust yourself to grow and become. And the way you do that is you say yes to the doors that open. You walk through and look around, grow with what you see around you, become more of who you are, and another door will open. And the answer will be yes, unless you're saying no to say yes to a door that's better. So that's my answer.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I really appreciate that. Now, when you think of the area that you work in, psychotherapy, and just helping people, figure out how to get to their best selves and to remain healthy mentally, emotionally, psychologically, and relationally. What do you feel like is poorly understood in this area of your work?
A lot of people do not understand that trauma, how it affects us, no matter what happens. When my son committed suicide, I had to do an anthropological dig of our whole lives with the new skills I had as a psychotherapist that I never had as a mom. And as I did, I found the stories I either never knew or never understood.
Right,
And so much of them, so much of what ended up with him ending his life with, and then I killed myself,
right.
all started with trauma,
Hmm.
unresolved trauma. And what it does, it creates noise in the system and it creates a fragility. Because if you don't even know, it'll be unconscious,
Right,
but it's there. And if it's not resolved, it's not known, it's not integrated into your story, so you have conscious power over it,
right.
it will show up in moments where you feel similarly to the time you were traumatized.
Yeah,
And as soon as you feel that same feeling, it'll trigger a volcanic explosion of emotion, trapped emotion, that to flee, to escape, to do anything. And it's far more powerful than the situation you're in.
right,
And so it's so hard to realize that when you're hitting a situation that triggers this flood of emotion, that it's not the situation you're looking at that's the cause.
right.
It's the past trauma. And so that's so incredibly important for people because it ends up destroying so much of what could be.
Gotcha. It's amazing that trauma is so devastating. I recently read a book by a lady who has a PhD named Jill Bolt Taylor called The
Oh,
Brain.
yeah.
You're probably familiar with that book. And what I found to be really amazing was how she laid out that although we have two brain hemispheres, right and left, our each hemisphere has a logical or thinking and an emotional side. So, many of us think that the left brain is just all logical and the right
Mhm.
brain is all, feeling. But it's really that the left brain is thinking and feeling,
Mhm.
and the right brain is thinking and feeling. So it's almost like there's four different personalities that live
Mhm.
within all of us that have to be integrated.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like the trauma that when someone faces trauma, that it disintegrates those four parts.
Yeah.
And so it might quiet one part, but eventually when a emotional experience is brought up and exposes that deep hidden trauma, that other part that's been really quiet all of a
Mhm.
sudden starts showing itself. The other parts of our brain goes and shuts down, and now we have this new personality that we don't know who we are and why we're doing things that we're doing. And
Yeah.
so it's really important to keep growing in our knowledge. And if we are finding ourselves in a place where we don't understand why we're doing what we're doing, that we reach out and we get help. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree, but I would add something. When you are flooded with an emotion, a negative emotion, and you just feel like, I got to get out, whatever that is,
Right.
it's an overreaction
Yeah.
for the most part. Unless there's a saber-toothed tiger behind you, then you flee, flee.
Right.
It's an overreaction, and your job is to stop,
Right.
hold, do not act.
Right.
You will overreact. You have to wait till your body and your mind calms down, calm the waters of the flood.
Yeah.
Wait for more information. Hold on. This is what took my son out. He was flooded with an emotion. He acted on it and he was gone.
Right.
And then I had to find out that the reason he was demoted from a position he had and not told what was wrong. And he
Mhm.
kept saying, what have I done wrong? He felt like a failure.
Right.
and he had never gotten a B in his life. And he suddenly was a failure, he felt, and it was intolerable. And it created this incredible flood where he, jettisoned out and took his life.
Right.
And it was 2 years later when I was trying to research this and come back to life myself, because I went with him, very much so.
Understood.
I found on Google that the reason he was demoted was because his job was going to go away because the company was being bought by IBM. And his position was going to be gone. And they didn't want to lose him. They wanted to keep him. He was too valuable. So they were moving him to a place that would survive the buyout. But they couldn't tell him because it was too soon. They hadn't gone public. So with the little tiny bit of information he had that he was being demoted, he took it personally. He flooded and killed himself.
Oh, wow.
For no reason.
Right.
If he had just held on and not acted and just let the wave roll past him and let himself calm down a little, it would have all come through and everything would have worked out beautifully.
Right. And I think many of us, if you're listening, have struggled with those thoughts. And it's something that happens in an event. And it's not so much the event that causes the issue, it's the story that we tell ourselves and the meaning that we give the event, right? Because the event itself sounded like it was very negligible.
Right. But he took it personally and he flooded because something similar had happened before, many years ago as a child. He felt not good enough. He felt like he had failed, and that was never resolved. And so when he hit those feelings again, he just flipped out and was gone within an hour. And so the most important thing to realize that we have a survival brain.
Yes.
And it is as it was back in the primeval jungle. And it's there to help us survive. That was the first part of our brain. And so back then, there was nothing but danger around us. So if we didn't think the first thought and the first thought had to be the worst case. If it wasn't the worst case, we could very well be lunch.
Right. Yes.
And so nowadays, I haven't found very many saber-toothed tigers, but that brain is exactly as it was back in the primeval jungle because it helped us survive. And anything that has helped us survive has stayed exactly as it was. And so that reflexive brain, nowadays, when you hit any problem, the first thing you're going to think of, guaranteed, is the worst possible case.
Right.
Which has the least likelihood to be true these days. And so you have to understand the first thought you have is going to be the least likely to be true, but it's going to be the one that's going to have all the emotion attached to it and all the fear and all that. But if you can just basically just hold that in abeyance.
Yes.
And think instead, what's more likely, or what would I prefer to have happen?
Right.
That also those both have more probability than the worst case.
Yes. Yes.
And there's a truism that whatever you focus on grows. That's the first rule of hypnosis. And so if you focus on the worst case, you're going to overreact, you're going to be filled with fear, and you're going to do something silly that isn't going to be appropriate for the situation.
Right.
So if you think of something more likely, your response will also be more modulated, more appropriate. Okay. So you have the power to realize that your first thought is going to be the worst case and the least likely. So just bracket it.
Right.
Don't act on it. Just go, okay, there's the worst case. Then think of what would I prefer or what's more likely. And in either case, you're going to be in a more modulated, open state.
Right.
And then you will not overreact. And so we have to really realize that we have the consciousness to realize that the first thought we have is the worst case. And then proceed accordingly
Right.
in our own best interest.
Exactly.
So that's what we have to do, because otherwise we're setting ourselves up to overreact and make hell out of heaven.
Right. I cannot agree with you more. So let's dig into your book a little bit here, because again, it is an amazingly written book, and I think a lot of people, whether they've gone through that experience of to the extent that you've gone through it, especially parents, I think this would be a really good book for them to get to learn how to prevent their
Yes.
children from going through some of the tragedies that John
Yes.
went through and things that he experienced as a young kid and that he saw and that happened to him in the neighborhood and things along that line that you share in the book, which you share very openly about what happened to him. And it was pretty intense. And I won't go through all of that. But in your book, you discuss coping with grief and loss. How can unresolved grief impact a person's productivity, right? Because it's a Productivity Smarts podcast. What strategies do you recommend to help someone regain their focus and efficiency at work when they're going through grief and loss?
First of all, grief and loss take an enormous amount of energy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a natural process. Don't fight it. Don't fight it. Take time off if you need. Allow yourself to feel,
Right.
because it's essential that you allow it full expression. Let it out, because otherwise you will hold it within every cell of your body,
Yes.
and that will impede your productivity or your relationships, your happiness in life. But we have to acknowledge and accept that there will be times to grieve.
Right.
There will be times to be in shock. But the whole point is, don't fight it. Allow it. Get help. Have a place where you can be with someone to talk about it and work this through, because it can work through.
Right.
And once the story is told, and once the full expression is done, you've offloaded an enormous amount of energy, negative energy. And the more you do that, the more you have yourself in the present moment to be available and able to work
Right.
and able to deal with what's in front of us. But until we do that work, we really are co-opted.
Right. Right. And you mentioned something in the book, and it was, I don't remember exact story, but it was a situation where you talked about how when a dog is wet, they do a full body shiver,
Yes.
right? They
Yeah.
do a full body shiver. And that
No,
we need to do the same thing, because trauma not only impacts us mentally and emotionally, but like you said, every cell in our bodies is impacted by that trauma, which becomes a neuropeptide or neurochemical that goes throughout our entire body. And the only way to release it is to talk through it and to physically kind of get it out. And
no, it's so true, Gerald. I'm glad you reminded me of that, because it is so true that animals in nature, when they face a near-death experience and survive, if you watch them, if the leopard, grabs the little impala, baby impala, and somehow or another the impala is free and alive after the incident,
right,
the impala will lay there for a minute, and then they will start to get up a little bit and start to look around, and pretty soon you'll see it start shaking all over. And that shaking is shaking off the near death experience,
mm,
because we're in a physical crisis.
right,
Our whole body is in physical survival crisis. And so you have to really shake it out. And there's so many books on this, and it's so important to really understand that it's not just emotional,
yes,
it's a physical thing. Our
right,
life is being threatened, our body is being threatened with death. And if we survive it, if you find yourself in a crisis and and it's over, get up, and when you can, shake your whole body, because it'll help avoid
yes,
PTSD.
yes. I shared earlier in my podcast that, I went through a vestibular imbalance issue back in 2018. And, at that point, I couldn't really shake because I couldn't walk. And
No.
I was able to restore my ability to walk. But what I do know is I started practicing yoga and meditation and started doing exercise, but it was qigong bouncing. And it's just
Mm,
very gentle bouncing, but just kind of moving the energy in throughout my body and understanding what that meant and with the meridians and everything, but also
mm,
doing the yoga. And I realized that as I did that every day, I was
mm,
removing stress from my
mhm,
body, right?
mhm,
Because sometimes we may not be in that place where we can go do a rigorous workout, or we can, we have a limitation or a constraint that we can't just do this big shake, but we can do small things to move
mhm,
our bodies, to de-stress ourselves, to meditate, so that
mhm,
we can get past this, because it does sink in your body, and you have to take the time to process out,
mhm.
right?
Absolutely. You got it. I mean, it's so true because we freeze. Part of it, we freeze
Right.
in that moment around that incident. And with the vestibular thing, I've had vertigo.
Yeah, that's what I had. That's what happened. But it
And
wasn't just normal vertigo. It was one that created a permanent, or I will say a permanent constraint. I use that word.
well, everything is just a challenge. And what you do with it is everything. What
Yeah,
happens to us is out of our control, but what we do about it
right.
makes us either a victim or triumphant. And I've been told I'd never walk again. And guess what? I'm walking.
Yeah, same here.
But I know how horrible vertigo is. I mean, I had a full case of it. So, but the whole issue is that vertigo is all about balance.
Yes,
And so once you have some power back, it's about finding balance
yes, yes.
in your
And
body.
exactly. And also one of the things that I realized as I've recovered is that at the time, emotionally and with some other things going on, I was out of balance.
Yes,
Right.
that's
And so
what
the body, right.
the inner ear is telling you you're out of balance. And guess what? You're not going to be able to move a quarter of an inch because
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So I want to get back to your book here, because you emphasize the importance of self-care. Obviously, it's kind of tied into what we're talking about. You emphasize the importance of self-care and mental health. Can you elaborate on how taking care of your emotions, emotional well-being, can enhance your overall productivity, and what practical steps people can take to integrate self-care into their busy schedules?
okay. Well, like we're just talking about, balance is the key. It is the key. We are emotional. We are physical. We are logical. We are looking at, we have work. We have histories. We
Mm.
have all this, and we're the center of all of that. And so I really believe that balance is such an incredible key. What my son didn't ever, I know he never realized this, but every single one of us is the core of a whole galaxy around us.
Mm-hmm.
Every star in the firmament is exactly as we are. We are each that star, and we have a whole array of objects and people and everything else around us, all at the exact same distance that needs to be for the whole system to be in balance,
Right.
coherent, and moving stably, consistently in orbits that keep the integrity of the whole.
Right.
And so, with my son, when he decided to opt out, what he couldn't know is that all the members of the galaxy around him at all the different distances from him, from closest to furthest out, the whole galaxy started to yaw and go into imbalance and crash and change, and nothing could remain the same again
Right.
because he held it all exactly as it needed to be. Each one of us is that.
Mm.
And so your well-being is absolutely integral to the functioning, the consistency, the competence of every other member of your galaxy.
Right.
So being in center, being in balance, accepting, really understanding your past, not splitting off,
Right.
not denying it, not avoiding it, but accepting it and really doing the work to stay in center is so absolutely key to productivity, happiness, success, longevity, everything. But balance is the key,
Right.
if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I love the example of each one of us is like the sun with a galaxy of objects floating around us. And it's so interesting too, just how from a mental and an energy standpoint, quantum physics talks about entanglement, right? That we are so entangled with each other, just not only when we see each other physically, but just mentally and energetically and emotionally, how we can be so entangled. Thinking about this whole idea of balance, many people struggle with balancing personal challenges and professional responsibilities. What advice do you offer in your book for maintaining that balance during difficult times without neglecting personal and family needs?
We have so many different pulls on us,
Right.
And I had a mentor many years ago right after my son's suicide. A man came into my life and he was like a guru.
Okay.
And he just had gone through, as a little boy in Argentina, he had developed the polio before the Salk vaccine. And his mother and grandmother took turns massaging him for 9 months, 24 hours a day. And 9 months later, the polio remitted
Wow.
instantaneously, and he had his body back. And he said, I was just so thrilled. All I wanted to do was dance. Well, dance requires balance.
Right.
And so he went to a famous dance studio in Buenos Aires and he said, I want to dance. And they said, you can't dance. You have no legs. And he went, oh. And then he said, well, can I just sit in the back and watch? And they said, sure. So every day he'd go and sit in the back and watched intently and then go home and do what he could. And little by little, his body came back and he became a famous choreographer. He was a choreographer to My Fair Lady in New York. And he traveled the world, and in all these different places, he'd have all these insights because he became very prescient after the polio remitted.
Right.
And he used to teach balance classes. And the whole thing is finding balance in each part of your body, every bone, every joint. What's the perfect alignment? And we structure imbalance in our lives as we walk through our lives every day.
Yes.
Our bodies start to hunch over or pull back. And it's all this load of imbalance that we're carrying, and our bodies keep adjusting to it in ways that create more imbalance.
Right.
And one of the things so it's a physical thing. And so he'd teach, if you just find the center of your joints, your shoulder, your head, your neck, your stance, and your legs, and it has to be just completely in balance. And when you do that, it heals.
Yes.
There's a lot of healing that happens just like that. And one time I went into his workshop and I had a horrible migraine, and I only went in because I wanted to tell him I couldn't continue. I had to go home. I had to go to the ER. And as I walked in, he looked at me and he said, what's wrong with Sally, everyone? And I was like, I didn't think it could show. It was my head. And everybody said different things. And he just came up to me and he said, that's all really good, really good. And he came up to me and he said, may I adjust you? And I said, yeah. And he just pushed from my back. He pushed my back about an inch forward. So I was a little bit more over my feet,
Yes.
a little bit over the ball of my feet. And I'm not kidding you, Gerald, the migraine dropped. And I had never had that experience in my life. I mean, for me, migraines last 3 or 4 days.
Right.
And they're excruciating.
Right.
But the migraine, the whole complex collapsed just with that. So it was a proof that balance is everything. And so balance is working with your family, giving yourself time to be with your family, have time to be, with your relationships, being with your work, with your
Right.
everything. It all has to be in balance or you're going to be out of balance.
Exactly. And
And
today it's one of the things where the idea of balance, I've heard someone say there's no such thing as balance anymore. You can't be in balance. You have to, you got to work and go for it over here, and then you have to take some time off over there, and so on. And I really believe what you just said is so true, that when our bodies, our minds, our spirits, our hearts are in balance, are coherent, that the body begins to heal
yeah,
itself, right?
yeah.
Because I used to get migraines. I could always tell for myself when a migraine would come on, because especially when I was younger, the right side of my eye, it would all of a sudden get blurry and
Yeah,
go
oh,
really
yeah.
blurry. And then I knew it's like, okay, it's coming on. I need to go to the dark room. But if I was out, I was like, I know I'm going to get sick. And then I'm going to have this massive headache for the rest of the day. I'm going to be done. And so it was really important to figure out how to address that, right? How to protect ourselves from that. But it's a really interesting story that he just kind of aligned your back and your posture,
Yeah,
and whether it's freeing up the meridians in your body so that energy could go and remove the block, because anytime we're feeling pain or disease, it's really a blockage of the meridians in our body, and we're not getting the right amount of energy to that part of the body, and that it becomes an issue. So
yes,
so he became really sensitive to his own body through that process, but he also became very sensitive to other people's bodies, probably which made him such an amazing choreographer during that time as well.
absolutely. He walked like a cat. I mean, you couldn't see there was no push or pull. It was just flow. He was just amazing. And one of the things, let's see, I went to an acupuncturist once because I had a huge migraine.
Right.
And he ended up doing one single point on my side and he walked away. And about 30 seconds later, he said, well, you should be feeling something right about. And when he said the word now, again, the migraine collapsed.
Mm,
And I was like stunned. This is just stunning stuff. And afterwards, he said, you know what? I'm never going to cure your migraines because for you, your migraines are giving you an important message. And if you didn't get them, you'd get something worse.
wow.
And I believed him because the migraines are all about imbalance.
Right.
And so when you're out of balance and you're just pushing and forcing yourself to keep going and keep going, your body knows better.
Yes.
The body's trying to save you.
Right.
He's not only expressing the pain, it's also trying to say, whoa,
You better slow down.
getting enough. You're getting enough.
Something's worse coming, so we
Yeah.
need to slow this train down and
Yeah.
limit what you can
And
do, because something's worse coming if we don't do that.
right. So it's true. It's the sun, the whole idea of a star
Right.
and all that has to keep everything consistent around it. That star's balance is key to the rest of the galaxy.
Right.
So if you're not in balance, nothing else can be either. Your words won't be in balance. They
Mm.
won't be productive. They won't be helpful. They will be skewed and off point.
Wow. That's pretty amazing. So let me ask you another question here. In the process of healing and finding resilience, as discussed in your book, what role does setting realistic goals play in maintaining your well-being and productivity? Can you share any tips for setting goals and achieving goals during challenging periods?
Yeah. First of all, you better accept where you are.
Right.
And then, first of all, make goals that are self-care goals. Keep yourself in integrity as much as possible because without that, nothing else will be possible.
Right.
So when you're going through a grief and loss, that grief and loss has physical ramifications.
Mm.
It's not just a relationship. We're connected
Right.
with all the other objects around us, the human objects and everything else. There's a resonance there. And when something breaks apart like that, you are in danger.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to really restore the integrity of the system, starting in the center of you.
Yes. You know what I found as you're talking, and I found it in my own life when this is one of the reasons I started the podcast, was in my prior life, I was trained, let's say technically as a project manager. So I would come up with a goal and I could create what they call a work breakdown structure, or a way of decomposing that goal from a big idea to little small ideas, schedule them out, and then have a plan. And now I'm just going to work my plan, right? And sometimes it didn't work, but it could be very stressful because I was efforting the whole way. I wasn't
Yes.
it was just me efforting. And what I realized is, after going through the vertigo and having the vestibular constraint and being limited in what I could do, I was at a point where I could do maybe 1, 2, or 3 things a day, and that was it. I had to take naps. And so a big part of my focus was on taking care of myself because I had to, right? I had to. And because I had to, I learned a new way to envision my goals. And I started seeing goals that previously would have taken years for me to accomplish, or things along that line. They started happening just so fast because I was focused more on becoming than just doing. And sometimes I think when it comes to goal setting, we can be so caught up in just the doing of reaching the goal, instead of becoming the kind of person that can attract, and those resources will be brought to us. I don't know if you have any thoughts around that one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're bringing to mind, again, if we are human beings,
Yes.
we're not human doings. But if you are fully who you are, you have so much power.
Right.
You have so much potential. But if you're not 100% in yourself, you are in jeopardy.
Yes.
You are unproductive. You're off balance. You're not, you don't have full power.
Right.
And so we really, the integrity of the system is the most important thing to conserve first and foremost, because everything else falls from that. Now, my own story about that is, because my son was such a superstar, he was reading it too. At 7, he was giving me really good 45-minute debates on why he didn't need to make his bed. And he was winning, And I was like, I have to stay the mom, what am I going to do? And so I went back to school to keep up. And then I couldn't get a B because he never got a B and I got one, and he just crucified me. I thought, I'm not going to give you that chance again, if I can help it. So I never got another B, not because I was so smart, but I was just terrified of another crucifixion like I got before. So at one point I was taking a statistics class, and statistics for me is about the most boring thing on earth.
Right.
And I never found a better, if you need a way to get to sleep, if you have insomnia, just open a statistics book. I guarantee you in 5 minutes, you'll be sound asleep. You're going to do a nose plant right in the middle of the book. And every time I'd be trying so hard to study, and I was working, late hours studying and working full time and taking care of my kids and blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't keep my focus, and I'd try so hard to read the chapter of the statistics book that was required, that was the assignment. And all of a sudden I realized I needed to just let go.
Right.
And so when my face wanted to hit the pages and me pass out,
Right.
I let myself do it. And I'd wake up about 15 or 20 or 30 minutes later, and I'd have so much more energy, and I could get through the book then.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a problem.
Right.
So I learned to allow my body to do what it needed to do.
Yes.
And I became more efficient, and I got straight A's, and I ended up with highest honors, not like I said, just because I was afraid of another negative opinion from him. Uh,
Sometimes they'll do it to you, won't they?
well, children are our teachers that we think
Yes,
we're supposed to teach them, but honestly, they're the ones teaching us. We
right.
better be, well, we need to take the lesson because we're making a lot of mistakes right now. And
Exactly.
it's not
Exactly.
very smart.
Exactly. So as we begin to finish up here, I have one last question for you around your book. And in your book, you touch on finding new purpose after a significant loss. How can discovering a new sense of purpose or passion influence yourself? And what advice do you have for someone seeking to find this new direction in their life?
Everything that happens to us is a teaching.
Hmm.
It's not to take you out, it's to equip you,
Right.
it's to move you, it's to rewrite you.
Right.
And when my son committed suicide, I wanted to go with him at first. I almost did. But then I couldn't do that because I had another son and I couldn't do that to him. He had just lost his brother. I
Right.
just my son. And so I had to stay. And as I thought through things, I realized that my son could not be a tragedy because he was too successful.
Hmm.
He was too successful. So I thought, then this can't be bad. There must be more.
Right.
And let me tell you, this is an amazing thing that happened. About a month after he died, I was, still just completely immersed in all the pain and grief. But I was starting to think that he couldn't possibly be a tragedy. When I got a call one afternoon on a Sunday from a woman who said, "You don't know me, but I know about your son.
Hmm.
And I'm a psychic, and I have something extremely important to tell you, but I won't tell you over the phone. You'll have to come to my house. I will give you a free reading, but I will very definitely have to see you at my house. I will not do this over the phone." And when she said that, all I could think of was, I'll do anything.
Right.
She lived in Sedona. I live in Santa Barbara. It's probably about 10-hour drive. And I was like, okay. So my boyfriend had to drive because I was unable to drive. But we got there and she brought me in her home and her living room had these giant crystals, north, south, east, and west, each a different color. And we sat in the middle and she started talking. And she spoke for an hour, and I don't remember all of what she said, but I remember this much because it hit me like a ton of bricks. She said, "Your son came and did what he needed to do and left." But she said, "You and he share the same reason for being on earth. He finished his part. You'll finish the rest."
Wow.
And at the time, I had no idea what she was talking about. But I'm going to tell you now, I do. And everything is not to take us out. It is the same thing. Learn from it. Don't demonize it. Don't awfulize it. Look at what's the gift. There's a gift in everything.
Right.
If we look at the negative, it'll just take us out. What's the percentage in that? And so I started looking at my son's life as a teaching, which it certainly was for me all the way along. But then I realized there was more to teach through him.
Right.
And it's never gone. And I've never said goodbye to him, Gerald, and he still shows up all the time. And I know he's with me. I know he and I are on this journey to help the earth become more coherent, more unified, more loving, more tolerant, more open and curious.
Wow. It's a powerful story. That's a powerful story. So, Sally, if people want to get to know you more and learn more about you, follow you, where can they find you?
My email is sbsal@cox.net. My website is sallyaraymond.com. My book is on Amazon and anywhere you find bookstores that you can order it. It has 4.6 stars and amazing reviews. And I'm very grateful because the only reason I wrote this book is to help save others from what happened to my son and to help everyone know how to keep life worth the living.
Yes. Sally, thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks so much for speaking with me. And I look forward to this podcast going live and sharing your story with the listeners and helping them to overcome and prevent some of the challenges that you've had to face. But there is a reason why you're here. And thank you so much for sharing that. All the best.
Thank you so much, Gerald. It's been a joy.
If you're enjoying the content and finding it valuable, we would appreciate it if you could take a moment and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us and helps us reach a wider audience. If you leave us a 5-star review, it would mean the world to us. Not only does it help us improve the podcast, but it also helps us attract more sponsors and grow our community. Thank you again for your support and for listening to the Productivity Smarts podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to Productivity Smarts, where we help you achieve your goals and live your best life. We hope you've gained valuable insights and actionable strategies to boost your productivity and increase your happiness and fulfillment. Remember to apply what you've learned and keep striving towards your goals. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more inspiring episodes and expert advice from our host, Gerald J. Leonard. Until next time, keep pushing forward and unleashing your productivity smarts.